Hello, I'm James Rivera, and this is a fourth of a series of videos that I've been posting about my previously published books. What's happening is I'm going to have maybe up to four new projects coming out over the next year to 18 months. So between now and when all that starts happening, I thought I would put these videos up about my previous books. And we're up to actually my fourth and fifth books because they were both developed at the same time. Rock and Romanticism, Blake, Wordsworth, and Rock from Dylan to You Too by Lexington Books. At the time, it was a subsidiary of Rowman and Littlefield, but Rowman and Littlefield has now been swallowed up by the Bloomsbury Death Star. I'm starting to feel like that because they're acquiring my books. They bought up Continuum, and now they've bought up Rowman and Littlefield just this year, which is in the last year. And then Rock and Romanticism, Post-Punk Goth, and Metal is Dark Romanticisms. Now, I'm bringing them both up. I'm only going to talk about this first one here first with Lexington and now Bloomsbury because they were both developed at the same time. All right, so what happens is around 2014, I've been living in Ohio for about 6 years, and I wanted to do a project that was specifically about Ohio. And then when I think about Ohio, I thought, rock and roll, Cleveland rocks, right? The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum and the archives are there in Cleveland. The archives are at a community college, and the museum has its own beautiful building there, and it's really cool. You need to go if you can. Great stuff. Great letter by Hunter S. Thompson threatening to beat someone up for stealing his, cassettes or something. It was like to the editor of Rolling Stone or something like that. It was great. I might have taken a picture of it. I should have found it before I started this. Anyways, so I think I want to do something dedicated to rock and roll. All right. So, and then the next thing that happens after that is I go to Best Buy. My daughter, Becca, at the time, who did one of the covers, two of the covers for my books. She did the cover for my second book, Reading as Democracy in Crisis, Interpretation, Theory, History. And she did the cover for my David Bowie book. And I'll come up, that'll be the next one after these two. She was starting a program at University of Central Florida in digital media, and she needed camera equipment. All right, so I was living in Ohio. I mean, I couldn't drive down there to shop with her, so I drove to one of the Best Buys in Ohio, and there are these two girls working behind the counter, Leah and Taylor. And they were great. They're high school, they're in high school, kind of closer to graduation, I guess. And they were great because they're both photographers. Okay. My daughter Becca had given me the equipment she needed for her courses. And what I would do is I went up to the counter there in Best Buy in Ohio. Those two girls called the store down in Florida. And had them gather up all the stuff, and then used my Best Buy card, and I paid for it. And my daughter Becca in Florida just had to go pick it up. It was great, but it took about an hour. So of course, I was kind of hanging out with them and talking to them, and we had some time to kill. So they started showing me their photography, and it was amazing. Both of them were amazing photographers. They really were very talented. And Taylor was doing rock photography. So I thought, this is really exciting. So I talked to all right, let me show you her photography because it's on my books. Okay. Rock and Romanticism, Blake, Wordsworth, and Rock from Dylan to You Too. This is a photo she took at a Fall Out Boy concert. All right. And he looks like he's floating in space, but that's just a little sparkly dust particles caught by the lights at the concert. And this is also her photograph, Taylor Fix. Okay, she's on Facebook, I think, and definitely on Instagram. And she's still doing rock photography, and she does wedding photography and personal photography. So if you need a photographer, check her out. Fickes Taylor. And I mean, she's just a teenager when she took these. I mean, look at that. All right, and look at that. Is that freaking cool or what? So it's exciting work, okay? And you know, I mean, I've been a college educator for almost 15 years at that point. And when I see a young person with talent, it's exciting, and I want to support them, okay? I want to support both of them any way I could, because they were helping me too, and they're very cool. I talked to Lee Fernside, who is a professor of art at the same college where I was working in Ohio. And she was the director of the gallery. And I said, hey, let's do an exhibit dedicated to Ohio rock and roll. Now, I'd wanted to do just Taylor's photographs, okay? Because these are just the tip of the iceberg, man. You got to check out her Instagram page. It is amazing. Just great rock photography, all kinds of bands, and all around the world, you know. And Lee was like, well, I know some rock photographers too. So we wound up getting 4, and we staged an exhibit on Ohio rock and roll. Lee's the art director. She did the heavy work, all right? I shouldn't say we. She did it, okay? That's actual work. I mean, like work using your hands that makes you sweaty. I was an electrician for 16 years. I know all about that. But then Lee's the one who did it, okay? All right. But I had the idea, at least. I mean, that was something. And it was a successful exhibit. You know, Taylor's works were there, and other 3 photographers, and there's a book. And it's on my website at jamesrivera.com. I think I have a copy of the PDF up there somewhere. I don't know how easy it is to navigate to that stuff right now, the way my site's set up, but it's up there. And then I thought, you know, I mean, rock and roll and romanticism goes way, way back. It goes back to the 60s. And then in metal, there's Iron Maiden's cover of Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner. There's a Fugs covering Wordsworth. There's Blake showing up everywhere in big and small ways. I mean, romanticism and rock and roll have gone together a long time. And Oxford University Press has published a couple of monographs on that topic. Okay, so I saw, and just a couple. I can think of 2 off the top of my head. Triumph of Vulgarity and The Cowboy and the Dandy, and I'm pretty sure there's another one, but man, I can't remember the title. So I thought this was a rich area of study. Okay, so I sent a call for papers out to the NASR website, listserv, National Association for the Study of Romanticism, and I got overwhelming responses. It was great, you know. I got 50 chapter proposals, 50, okay? And I set a deadline, and I got 26 completed chapters, and 25 of them got published, okay? And that's why I have 2 of these out that came out basically at the same time, okay? So what I had to do was figure out, how am I going to distinguish these collections? And one of them, Blake, Wordsworth, and Rock from Dylan to U2, the title kind of says it all, okay? And then the subtitle, Post-Punk, Goth, and Metal as Dark Romanticisms. So this book, which will be the subject of the next video, leans more toward the Gothic side of Romanticism. And this book leans more toward the pastoral, okay? And that's the difference between the 2 books. So they're very different in content, even though they share the same top title. I wish I just left the subtitles as the titles of the books. I think that would have been better. But this book here, Lexington Books, published in 2018, dedicated to my parents for putting up with all my music. This book and these chapters was I think the first one to come out. Lexington. I'm not sure exactly in what order they came out within about 6 months of each other. It's hard to get any publisher to take on 2 books at a time, and I think with anthologies is they kind of take a while to come out anyhow. You tend to lose contributors, and you don't want it to drag out for years like my theory volume did. So that's the story behind these 2 books. So we have a great group of very diverse contributors to both collections. Luke Walker, Tangled Up in Blake, The Triangular Relationship Among Dylan, Blake, and the Beats. Romanticism in the Park by Janneke van der Leest. He wrote Romanticism in the Park, Mick Jagger reading Shelley. Douglas T. Root, William Blake, The Romantic Alternative. Nicole Lobdell, Digging at the Roots, Martha Redbone's The Garden of Love, Songs of William Blake, one of many albums that set William Blake's Songs of Innocence and of Experience to music. And the thing with Martha Redbone here, once I heard this album, I couldn't read Blake's poetry without hearing her music in my head. It's like Aretha Franklin's cover of Otis Redding's Respect. Yeah, that's an Otis Redding song, right? I bet you thought it was an Aretha Franklin song. Well, you know why? Because it is an Aretha Franklin song now. Otis Redding even said so. That's my song, and she took it. So, but it's Aretha, man. What are you going to do? But that's the effect that Martha Redbone's music had on me. For years, I couldn't read Blake's poetry without hearing her music. The setting was just, the musical setting was just so natural and perfect. Tangle of Matter and Ghosts, U2, Leonard Cohen, and Blakean Romanticism. So, you see a pattern here. Blake comes up a lot. The Inner Revolutions of Wordsworth and the Beatles by David Booker. When the Light That's Lost Within Us Reaches the Sky, Jackson Browne's Romantic Vision. Swimming Against the Stream, Rush's Romantic Critique of Their Modern Age. Gary L. Tandy wrote about Jackson Browne, and David S. Hogsett wrote about Rush. Wordsworth's Michael, The Georgic and Blackberry Smoke, which is a really interesting approach to a more recent Southern rock, which Blackberry Smoke is. Ronald D. Morrison. Rachel Feder, Wordsworth on the Radio, which is actually very interesting. It's about a poet as well. And then Lorenzo Sorbo, the Scapigliatura and Poetes Maudits in the Songs of Piero Ciampi. And I've never taken Italian, so I apologize if I butchered that. But he's an Italian scholar of Romanticism. He's writing about Italian Romanticism. I really appreciated the international dimension of that chapter. So as you see, there's a lot of Blake chapters. There's some Wordsworth chapters, and it tends to be focused more on the 60s, 70s, and 80s, with a couple of more recent bands like Blackberry Smoke. But at the same time, they're really playing in like a 70s genre of music. So these 2 books were the beginning of a new direction that my publishing took, my scholarship took. And it led to, so far, 4 books involving rock music and Romanticism. So again, the first one here is Rock and Romanticism, Blake, Wordsworth, and Rock from Dylan to U2, which is now available by Bloomsbury. And then Rock and Romanticism, Post-Punk, Goth, and Metal as Dark Romanticisms by Palgrave Macmillan. And that'll be the next video. I'll focus on that a bit more. The next 2 videos after the one about the Post-Punk collection will be David Bowie and Romanticism with Palgrave Macmillan, and then Women in Rock, Women in Romanticism with Rutledge. When I did these 2 collections, I realized maybe only 25% of our chapters were about women in rock. So I wanted to correct that by having a collection that's exclusively about women in rock. And Women in Rock, Women in Romanticism with Routledge will be my most recently published book, okay? And that'll be the end of this series of 7 videos. The next book I'll probably have coming out will be a continuation of this collection of books. It'll be Romanticism and Heavy Metal, which I'm co-editing with Dr. Julian Knox out of the University of Georgia system. And I'm working with Dr. Samuel Gladden in the University of New Orleans system on another David Bowie book, which will be a very different kind of David Bowie collection. We're specifically soliciting chapters about facets of Bowie's life and creative production that have been underexplored, okay? Everybody loves Bowie in the 70s, okay? What's not to love? He was crazy, okay? He was over the top. He was like Elton John. He was like Liberace, very entertaining, okay? And very provocative, very attention-getting. That's how he's building his career. Everybody loves Bowie's Berlin period, which consists of 5 albums. And if you really want to get picky about it, the 3rd album in the Berlin trilogy, so-called Berlin trilogy, Lodger, was not recorded in Berlin. So, but what was recorded in Berlin were the previous 2, a couple of Iggy Pop's first 2 solo albums. David Bowie wrote the music for them and produced the first one, and then Iggy provided vocals and lyrics. And David Bowie, man, he was a great friend to Iggy Pop. He stepped back to make sure. I mean, he helped Iggy get the album out, the first one, that first solo album. And David Bowie wrote the wrote the guitar part for Lust for Life on a ukulele in a hotel room, I think, watching the opening credits for Hawaii Five-0. Which is great. I love that because I used to watch that show when I was a kid, and I loved the music then. So we're going to look at underexplored areas, and Black Star's getting a lot of attention, which it totally deserves. So we're going to look at David Bowie as a painter. We're going to look at David Bowie's films that aren't always talked about. Everyone talks about Labyrinth and The Man Who Fell to Earth, but what about the other ones? David Bowie as a producer, and on and on and on. Okay, it will be an interesting collection. And then the other 2 works I'm working on are not about rock music, and they're not about romanticism, but they're both creative works, and I'll talk about those separately when the time comes. This will be my 4th video. It's primarily focused on this book, Rock and Romanticism, Blake, Wordsworth, and Rock from Dylan to U2, published in 2018, originally by Lexington, a subsidiary of Rowman and Littlefield, but has now been acquired by Bloomsbury. If you would like to order any of my books for your college or university library or for your local public library, that would be great, because these are actually books built for libraries. Okay, they're expensive, and they're made to sit on a library shelf for 100 years and not rot. Okay, so and if you get a chance to read them, I think you'll find these very enjoyable, and not the least of which, one of the most common comments I got from contributors was, "Thank you, I had so much fun writing this." If the writers had fun writing it, I'm pretty sure you're going to have fun reading it. All of these rock and romanticism books. Get it for your library. If you want a personal copy, I'll see what I can do with my author discount. So email me at jamesrovera@gmail.com or go to jamesrovera.com, and I have a bookstore webpage where you can order the books and submit payment online, and I'll get it sent out to you. If you want a printed copy, let me know in your order. course you want a printed copy. You can order print copies and PDFs, but if you want a signed copy, let me know in the order and I'll have it shipped to me first and then sign it and send it out to you. Okay. And I got to tell you, I had great fun. I wrote the introduction, of course. And every time I come out with a book, there's some new idea that comes up with me. This one, what I did with this one, what came up for me, what came up as an application for me when I was working on this particular book, was the idea of Kierkegaardian idea of repetition. Okay, so the first section of my introduction that has its own title is Theorizing Rock, Historicizing Romanticism. And as you can see, I'm still kind of in that mindset where I'm theorizing history and historicizing theory, which I explicitly examined in that second book, Reading as Democracy in Crisis. And Kierkegaardian repetition is kind of in the background here. And what I brought into my scholarship here was Loewy's and Sayre's Romanticism Against the Tide of Modernity. And what that does is, if you're familiar with scholarship in Romanticism, the great debate since the early 20th century between A.O. Lovejoy and Babbitt, I think, was the question, what is Romanticism? How do you define it? Okay. A.O. Lovejoy took great issue in his review with Babbitt's definition, and at the same time, he couldn't really provide his own coherent definition. And he famously said that the word Romanticism has ceased to serve the function of a verbal sign. It's a word without meaning because it means so many different things. But Sayre and Loewy, these German scholars of Romanticism, they solved that problem. Okay. In my opinion, it's an effective solution, and it's creative, and it works. And they say that the emotional core, Romanticism is an emotional, affective response, a subjective response, something felt in reaction to modernity, which is a combination of capitalism and Enlightenment thinking. And it takes on some features like nostalgia, which is traditionally going back to the Schlegels associated with Romanticism. And they develop a taxonomy of Romanticisms. That's the thing. This emotional core expresses itself in many different ways, in many different historical periods. So instead of thinking of Romanticism as a period that starts with maybe Rousseau or Goethe and goes to, who knows, Byron, the death of Wordsworth, maybe 1850, however you want to define it. Romanticism is something that first surfaces at one point in history, and I'll talk about when I think it shows up, when I talk about the post-punk collection, and continues into the present. Because that reaction to capitalism plus modernity and the sense of isolation that it causes, disconnections from nature and from each other and from our culture and from the land, we still suffer from that. And Romanticism is an expression of that suffering, a reaction to it, in many positive and negative ways, which includes fascistic Romanticism, which I really get to look at closely in the David Bowie collection, which includes a study of David Bowie and fascism that I wrote. So these books are significant cultural commentary on our culture today through the lenses of Romanticism, because we are still also Enlightenment thinkers and we are still also Romantics. So I hope you are enjoying these videos. I hope my daughter Zoe is happier with my camera angles because she said my previous videos had very bad camera angles. So I hope Zoe's happy with me now with my camera angles. And she's 15, so she gives me a hard time about everything. And if I'm not around, she's laughing right now. She won't let me see it, but she's laughing. Yeah. And look for the rest of my videos. I have 3 more coming up. Okay. And then there will be a bit of a lull until one of these other books coming up gets published. I don't know when that's going to happen. We will see. The one that's there's 2 that are kind of far along. One could be picked up with a publisher at any time and put out there. And the other one's going through the peer review process. Well, it's going through the publisher process. And then the next step would be publisher review and then peer review. So that's going to take, you know how that goes, a couple of months. So thank you for your time. I hope you're enjoying these. Message me if you want to talk or email me. And buy my books for your libraries. I could use some money, Have a good one.